Thanks for tuning in at Brackeys.
Hello everyone and welcome to video number 21 in Make a Game, a cool series on making a video game in Unity. So today's video is really awesome. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be importing some really cool looking graphics for our enemy. And hopefully we get to set it all up. If not, I might split it up into a couple of videos. We'll have to see. But this is super awesome. Whoops, go away, iCloud storage. This is super awesome because it will of course make our game look better. And I'll try and teach these techniques in a way so you should be able to import any model that you find or make yourself or whatever. So I really try to keep these explanations general so you can apply them to other models. But cool. So of course, if you have any questions, just head over to forum.brackeys.com. I'm there to answer your questions. And then, of course, I want to mention that the model we are going to be using today was made by a cool guy named Samin Iben. And I will have a link to either a Facebook page or something of his. He also provides other cool models and stuff, which you should definitely check out. But another thing is that the model that we're going to be using can be found at Brackeys.com. If we head under projects and we look for the Make a Game course here, I really need to redesign this page. It's not really pretty, but here you can download the scripts and assets, and I will make sure to update that so the model we're going to be using is included. So that's enough talking for now. Let's open up the Make a Game assets pack that you've downloaded, and also let's open up our project as we left it last time. Remember, we ported it over to Unity 5. So it should look somewhat like this. And at the moment when we hit play, you can see that we can hit play here. Cool. We can roll over and we have this cube. We have a dying mechanic when we hit it. And we can also, for some reason it did it twice there. We might fix that at some point. And we can also just jump on top of it and it will explode. However, there is currently a bug with the particle system, and I will show you what that is all about a bit later. So now let's import the model. So navigate to your Make a Game assets pack. I'm just gonna remove this here. Cool. And then go under models, and in here you see Mario enemy, and we open that up, and you can see there are 3 Blender files. First one, the enemy.blend, is the actual model that we're going to be using, so that's kind of our starting point. The other ones here, enemy die and enemy walk, also includes the enemy plus a couple of animations, and it's very normal to do this where you have basically the enemy 3 times, but with a single animation on each. It's a very normal way of kind of handling these models that have several animations. So you'll see that quite a lot. But it's really easy because in Unity, we can simply take the model from the enemy and the rig from the enemy, and then take the animation, the die animation and walk animation from these 2 files and kind of link them to the enemy model. So you'll see how we are going to be doing that. And then we also have a body diffuse material or a texture here, and then eye diffuse texture. So if we open these up, it's a pretty simple image that maps with the UVs. Cool. And here you can kind of see what the enemy will look like, but I don't want to spoil it fully. It's of course from Mario. Where else would we get a typical enemy? So in here we are going to go under models. We're going to make a folder here called Mario enemy, or maybe just enemy. I'm just going to call it enemy. So double click that. And of course you don't have to use the one I'm using. It's of course going to be a bit easier if you can follow along the exact same way that I do it. But you can find any nice, decent looking model on the interwebs, or use Blender to create your own. There are a bunch of tutorials on YouTube on using Blender too. Anyways, so let's just select all of this and drag it into our newly created enemy folder. And Unity is going to load it all in, and it might take a bit of time because it's importing these Blender files. But actually that was fairly decent on the speed there. And when you import it, just like this, you might see that the enemy gets its material applied right away, or you might see what I just saw, that we'll have to do it manually. So that's kind of a 50-50 chance. I did this practice once, and it for some reason linked up there. Cool. So what we are going to do here is we're going to take our enemy and bring it into the scene. And you can see that it's way too big. So let's just scale it down. But instead of scaling it in here, I want to use the scale factor here. I just think that makes it a bit easier to work with. And I'm going to set it to 0.2. Other than that, we can pretty much leave everything else as is. It looks good, so let's hit apply on that. That's a lot better. And we can do the same thing with these two. So 0.2. Not that it's going to make a difference because the model here is not something that we're going to be using. Just nice to keep it clean. Then select all of them, go under rig, and just make sure it's set to generic and create from this model. And then we can set the root node to armature. And basically the root node is the top bone of your skeleton hierarchy. So if you have modeled before, you know what I'm talking about. If not, just select this. Then hit apply. And it's just going to re-import everything. Cool. Then we can go under animations. And this is where you'll see also if we expand these, you can see that under our enemy, we have only the default take, which we're not going to be using. So we can select our enemy and disable import animations. Then we can select the enemy die and see that we have a default take, which we're not going to be using, so we can remove that. And then we have the enemy die, so we can apply that just to tidy things up a bit. And then on the enemy walk, we can again remove the default take and just leave the enemy walk. We also want to make sure that the enemy walk loops as we play through it. You can see it does so down here, but we also want to have it do so in game. And to make sure it does that, simply enable loop time, and that's going to make sure it loops. So if for some reason your animation doesn't loop, simply find it by selecting the model, going under the animations tab and enabling loop time. If your model kind of jumps between looping and all that, you can try and play around with baking in some of the root transforms and messing around with these settings. It's going to work fine for the model that we're using here. So, but yeah, just so you know, that's where you should play around with things. Cool. So here you can see our shiny guy, and let's add some materials to him. So if we open up our enemy and go under the materials folder, you can see he has a body material and an eye material. And then what we do, actually, I know why they weren't automatically assigned now. It's because this was named body diffuse and this was named eye diffused. If that had just been body and this eye, they would have automatically been assigned. So you can, of course, rename them before importing, but it's really as easy as selecting. Actually, I'm going to do that up here. So selecting our body, finding the material here, and simply dragging the body diffuse into the albedo channel. And we're going to do the same thing with the eye. So we're going to select eyes, open up the material, and then just drag the eye diffuse under the albedo. So now you can see he already looks a lot nicer. Then we can maybe select him and rotate him a bit, so he faces the light. That's a lot better. And then we can select his two materials here. So let's select the body. Let's make that brighter. Something like that looks pretty good. And maybe bump down the smoothness a bit. Something like that, so our specular isn't as harsh. Then we can select the eye, and here I really want to get that concentrated specular, so I'm going to really bump up the smoothness quite a bit so we can get that really glossy eye feel. I think that looks really, really awesome with the light reflecting there. cool. And I'm also going to bump up the albedo color just a bit, not too much. There. So now we have an awesome looking enemy, and we can actually get him animated fairly quickly because we already have some nice looking animations. We have a die animation, looks like that. I can just expand on this a bit. See there. And here we have the walk animation. That's pretty much everything we are going to be needing for this fairly simple enemy. So what we can do now is we can implement him into our cube. So let's first select the enemy and let's drag him. Let's see here. So we can find our enemy center, open up the enemy. You can see we have a graphics object here. So what I want to do is simply just replace the graphics object with our new graphics here. So drag him under there, rename him to graphics, take the other graphics object and simply copy this component, then remove it. Then we can just entirely disable and it's gonna remove this cube. I'm just gonna wait a second, then I'll show you how to solve that, what it just said there. But then select our graphics here and then go up here and select paste component as new. So now we have our box collider there. Then we can reset the transform by right clicking, and we can also rotate him 90 degrees. You can type in 90 up here on the Y. And what we want to do here is we want to drag him down so he's standing on. Okay, now it's time to delete this cube. So here we can simply select it and hit delete, go continue. And this is where a lot of people get lost, because now this isn't blue anymore because we've lost our prefab connection. So how do we remove objects while still kind of maintaining or keeping ourselves linked to the prefab? Well, it's actually still linked, but it's just not a connection anymore. And what that means is that if we want this to appear and work as a prefab again, all we have to do is select the root here, enemy center, and hit apply, and everything goes back to blue. So that's something you will have to remember whenever you are removing objects from a prefab. So now let's just drag him down here until he stands on the ground firmly there. And then we can adjust the position of the box collider using the center and size values here. And one thing that you will notice is if you hold down Alt, you can fine tune the values a lot more than if you don't. So that's nice if you really want to get precise with things. So just kind of get it right. That's going to be just fine for now. Cool. We could of course be using a mesh collider, but I think that would just be overdoing things, especially because this guy is going to be moving, so that wouldn't make too much sense. We could then use multiple sphere colliders maybe to kind of brick him out, but I really don't see the need. I think a box collider will do just fine, and it will definitely be a lot less CPU intensive. Cool. So now that we have that in place, let's go ahead and adjust our Killbox and Hitbox. So let's just bring up our Hitbox here. Something like there looks pretty good. Let's just drag it out a bit. Drag it out here. Something like that. So if we jump on that from any angle, it's going to be really good. He's going to die. And then our Killbox, simply want to move that up a bit and scale it up a bit too. Something like that's going to be our Killbox. So now when we select everything here, we can see kind of our collision structure, and I think that looks fairly great. There's a chance that we might hit the edge here without hitting either the Killbox or the Hitbox. So maybe we'll just bring up the Killbox a bit to kind of get rid of that edge case scenario. We could be using more colliders to make it even more precise, but I think we've kind of ruined that chance now. Then maybe a bit more on the Hitbox here. just block that out. And yeah, I think in practice, this is going to be working just fine. Cool. So now that we have that in place, we can go ahead and hit play now. And things should be working. He's just not animating yet. And we can die.
Game over.
And we should also be able to kill him. Indeed we can. One thing you will notice, and this was what I was talking about before with the particles, is if we hit him while he's away from the center. Oops, I'm so bad at this game. I will attempt to hit him while he's not in the center. There, the particles will always spawn at the center point. And the reason why is if we look at the enemy center, this is where our enemy script sits. And if we double click on the enemy scripts to open it up in Mono Develop, we'll see that we are currently instantiating the death particles at this transform.position and with this rotation. So that means that they will always spawn right here, even though our enemy object has moved over here. So that's kind of a problem that we are going to solve whilst animating this guy. So let's start out by kind of creating the animation structure. We're going to create an animator controller. So if you remember, we've done this before with the enemy center. That's what controls him going back and forth. Now we're going to be doing this with the move and die animations. Actually, one thing I want to tweak before we get into that is I just want to kind of rotate him whenever he is going in the other direction. And that's easily done by simply tweaking the animation that we made for the enemy center here. So if we go under the enemy center animator, I've docked my animator panel down here so I can see it in the scene and game view whilst animating. We can see that we have this enemy move animation. And if we select our enemy center and go under animation, we should be able to see it here in action. And all I want to do here is simply go under add property, make sure to navigate under enemy, then transform and add the rotation property. And what we can do with this is just collapse the position there. What we can do with this is that we can make sure that we have a keyframe right here. Then move forward right until we hit the 4-second mark. Then add a key. Then go right past it and add another key. And this is where we'll rotate him. So we'll rotate him 180 degrees on the Y. Oops, what's going on? Oh, we are animating the enemy center. We want to, of course, have the enemy selected here and now rotate 180 degrees. So we should see him kind of go forward. Whoa, he's acting all kinds of crazy. So let's go under the curves here. Let's select our rotation. Let's select the entire curve, hit F to focus on it. Then right click, go under flat to make sure that it doesn't do all these spinny things on its own. Now we can see what is going on. And indeed it's acting weird. It's going fine here, it's going forward. Then it's rotating and then it starts slowly rotating in the other direction. And that of course makes sense because we have a rotation keyframe over here too. So what we want to do with this is we want to duplicate this frame here and just paste it over right up until this point. So there he will turn again. What you can do is of course extend this so that he waits with rotating until he kind of moves to the right again. But I think this is going to be looking just fine for our purposes. You can see what that does here. Rotate. And I kind of like that this is a pretty aggressive effect. We might just dim it down just a tad. But I kind of like how it just cuts off there. And again, if you can always mess around with the curves if you would like there to be some kind of smoothing, but I like the flat mode for this quite a bit. So now when we go in and play, we should see him follow this pattern. Indeed, we do. Cool. So now that he's always facing the correct direction, we are going to make sure that he also animates. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go into the project. We are going to go under Models, Enemy, right-click, Create, Animator Controller, and we are going to call this Enemy Controller. Or do we already have an enemy controller? No, this is the enemy center. Cool, so enemy controller. And then we'll go under the graphics object, and you'll see it already has an animator attached by default. We can drag in the enemy controller. Then we can open it up in our animator, simply select it and click on the animator. And you can see that you have it selected down here. Then what we want to do in here is we want to drag in some animation. So we'll just drag it up here. We can then expand our enemy die, drag that in there. We'll also drag in our enemy walk. And yeah, that's the two states that we are going to be using. We want to set the walk as the default, the layer default state. So you can see that it goes from our entry point into the enemy walk animation. And then we only want to transition to the enemy die if something happens. And we'll do this using a new part of the Unity mechanism system, which is a trigger. Before we used bools and then we kind of set them to true and then quickly to false again or whatever. But now we have a trigger component that simply allows us to trigger the animation without having to keep track of any values. So that's super cool. So what we can do here is simply call this trigger for die, and then we can make a transition from the enemy walk to die, and then select that, and as the condition, make sure we have the condition die. Then we'll make sure to disable has exit time, or it's going to wait for the end of the animation, and then maybe shrink down the fade time just a bit. So now when we go into the game and maybe bring the animator down here, we'll be able to observe what our enemy does here. So he'll walk back and forth, and when we click die, he'll fall. So that's super cool. We also, of course, need him to stop animating, but we'll do that through a script. Awesome. So now that we have that in place, we are actually ready to kind of implement all of this inside of in JavaScript. One thing that we will need to do is we will need to go under our enemy center controller here and make sure that it has a kind of non-animating state to transition to, so that it will stop moving once the character falls. And we'll again do this using a trigger, and we'll just call that stop. We'll then create an empty state here, simply called idle or stopped. Stopped is fine. And then we can simply make a transition from enemy move 1 to stopped when the stop triggers is set. And then also you want to select the stopped state and make sure that right default is set to false. Because right now if we hit play here and then stop him, whoops, we also have to make sure that has exit time is set to false. So right now if we just stop him, oh, actually that worked just fine. Surprising. I expected him to jump right back. Oh, he does. He jumps right to the center. So we just want to select stopped here and disable right defaults, and now he will stop his walk animation, or stop moving, and just stay put where he was when the stop trigger was called. Cool. So let's move on now. Now we can go into our enemy script and kind of edit it to fit our new animation setup. So let's double click the enemy here to open it up in MonoDevelop. And we want to make a couple of variables. The first one is going to be to our enemy animator, and it's going to be of type animator. The second one is going to be the center animator. That's also going to be of type animator. And I want this center animator to be a private variable because we'll just fill that in ourselves. Then we're going to make in the start function, actually let's do awake. Awake is generally used for making references to components and game objects. Then in here we can set center anim equal to and then transform dot get component, and we're gonna get the animator component. So that should be working. I'm too used to C#. This might not be the correct way of doing things, but if I remember correctly, this should work. Then we are not going to destroy the game object anymore when we jump on his head. And we don't want these particles to spawn at the transform position, but instead at the enemy anim.transform.position, and the same here. So enemy anim.transform.rotation. Then what we can also do is we can set the enemy anim dot set trigger, and the trigger name is die, so the enemy will die there. And then we can say center anim dot set trigger, and then it will stop, I believe. There we go. So that should actually do what we want it to, and hopefully we'll get no errors. No, we don't. I actually remembered how to do this. Implicit downcast from component to animator. Yes, I am aware that this is a downcast, but actually not sure how to kind of... If we want to make this explicit in JavaScript, I believe that we just write as animator. Yeah, now it's an explicit downcast. So basically what we're doing is we're saying that we want this get component to turn into an animator. And we're doing that by using an as animator add-on. That's called casting. Okay, cool. So now we should be able to select our enemy center and then drag our enemy anim on here, the graphics object there. And it should gather its own animator itself. So now when we hit play, and we can see him walking here, back and forth. And when we jump on his head, he dies, but he does so kind of weirdly. So let's see if we can fix this. So what has rotated here? So that's still facing the correct way, I believe. And the enemy here, that's rotated for some reason. Why does that rotate? No, it hasn't. So what's going on? Let's see. This, for some reason, has no influence on the graphics object, even though it's parented to that. That's super weird. So let's just try that again. Jump on his head, if I'm able to. Oh my god, this is embarrassing. There, it worked. Okay, so this is curious to me. There you can see another bug we'll have to fix, but that's not really what I wanted to happen here. Maybe it didn't have time to save the script. Okay, so now it's working. So we'll just assume, oh, now I know what was happening there. Of course, okay, so when he was very quickly rotating over here, that's when he died. And then, of course, the entire graphic was just flipped. Yeah, so that's not really a huge amount of things we can do about that. I mean, we could reset the position, but I don't really think that's something we want to do. No, that's just stupid. Let's not worry about that. And if we encounter it a lot of times, we'll fix it. I'm sure we'll find a way. Cool. So the last thing is I want to just gather some references to these kill boxes, because I think we should disable them once the enemy dies. So in order for us to do that, we'll also need to disable the box collider. So very easy way to do this is simply copying this box collider, then removing the component. Then we are going to add an empty object, call this box collider, drag that onto the enemy object, reset its transform, then simply go up here and paste the component as new, and we can simply drag this down. Or, I'm sorry, reset the Y position here, the center, there, and then drag it up a bit, something like that. And then what we can do is create another empty object, and we'll just call this colliders, drag that onto the enemy, drag the box, hit and kill box colliders onto there, hit continue, go up here, hit apply. And now we can head into the script, create a variable that we are going to call variable colliders. Colliders of type transform. And then down here, we'll simply either destroy them or simply disable them. I think we'll just destroy the object. I don't see any reason why we would keep it. So simply destroy the colliders dot game object, something like that. And then in here, we'll make sure that we make a reference to our colliders object there. And now when we hit play, we should be able to jump on the guy's head, and he falls down, and now we are unable to collide with him. So that was basically everything for making an enemy. Let me just see how long that video was. Whoa, okay, so I think it's just barely short enough to keep it in one video, so I hope you enjoyed it. I really wanted to show every step of the way when making a character like this. It's really a lot of tweaking and trying to get him work with the mechanics and all that, and I really didn't want to cut away on any of the figuring out of stuff, because I think it's really important that you get to see that part of the process too. So thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video.